Hi, I'm Jan Thomas, co-producer of Unboxed Productions and Random Greek Woman. And I want to welcome you to our production of Plato's Apology, with apologies to Plato. About 5 years ago, one of our board members, Lee Tilson, brought this idea to us. And so we considered how to best present this on our live online platform. And so we jumped on our time machine. And this summer, Kim Sandstrom, our co-producer and the director of the show, germinated an idea for a script. And then Bruce Seaman, an author we know, wrote the script for us. And now we have our show. I want to welcome you to Unboxed Productions, Plato's Apology.
I want to welcome you to today's version of the apology. Plato wrote this. It's the first of his writings. Socrates didn't write anything, but Socrates, Plato, and later Aristotle are viewed as the founders of modern philosophy, who taught us to start thinking about issues like, how do we make difficult decisions? What's the right thing to do? When is life worth living? What exists? This trial occurred in 399 BC in Athens. It was in a very fragile condition. 4 years earlier, Athens had surrendered to Sparta after a 27-year war, the Peloponnesian War. To put it in perspective, the Peloponnesian War was 5 times as long as World War II. Athens lost most of its resources during the lengthy war. Half of its citizens had either been killed or had fled Athens to save their lives. After the surrender, Sparta selected 30 wealthy Athenians, elites, to rule Athens as oligarchs. 2 of the 30 that had been appointed oligarchs, Critias and Carmenides, were associates of Socrates. After a year, Athenians overthrew the rule of the 30 oligarchs. This trial occurs only a few years later. As Athens worked to restore a semblance of its democracy, it had established a trial system in which any citizen could bring charges against any other citizen, as happened in Socrates' case. A trial would be held before a group of 501 citizens of Athens in the course of a day. As the trial proceeds, imagine 501 citizens listening to these proceedings. Socrates' accusers, the prosecutors, have presented their cases against Socrates to the 501 citizens. Socrates now responds to the charges.
Athenians, you've heard my accusers. Were you swayed by them? Were you persuaded by their well-composed arguments, their descriptions of me? Ha! They almost made me forget who I was. They hardly uttered a word of truth. One of their many falsehoods quite amazed me. When they said for you to be on guard, not to be deceived by the force of my eloquence. Well, as soon as I opened my lips, I proved myself to be anything but eloquent. Oh, that seems shameless to me. Unless, by force of eloquence, they mean the force of truth. If so, then I admit it. I am eloquent. But how differently eloquent from their eloquence. Listen, they've scarcely spoken the truth at all. But I will present the whole truth. No, not with well-crafted phrases prepared in advance like my accusers. I'll use the words and arguments that occur to me at the moment, because I'm confident in the justice of my cause. I mean, seriously, I shouldn't come here like a youth with a prepared speech. Not at my age. Not from me. I'm over 70 years old. I mean, here I am, appearing now for the first time in a court of law. I'm quite a stranger to the language of the court. Never mind the manner of speech, but think only of the truth of my words. Pay attention to that. Let the speaker speak truly, and the judge decide justly. Now, first, I must reply to the earliest charges and to my first accusers. Then I'll go on to the later ones. Because for years I've had many accusing me falsely. And I'm more afraid of them than of the prosecutor Meletus and his party. Yes, they're dangerous too in their own way, but the others are far more dangerous. Their accusations laid hold of you when you were children, persuading you with their lies, telling of one Socrates, a wise man who speculates about the heavens above, searches into the earth beneath, and makes the worse appear as the better. Athenians, my truly dreaded accusers, are the spinners of this fable, that searchers for truth don't believe in the gods. And these accusers are many, and their charges have stood for many years. They were made when you were so impressionable, in childhood or in youth. And I had no defenders. Now, I wasn't present to defend myself. Hardest of all, I don't know who they are, and I can't provide the names of my accusers. Except for one who is a comic poet. I can't cross-examine those envious and malicious accusers who persuaded you. I have to simply fight with shadows and argue with phantoms, knowing no one will answer. My opponents are of two kinds, one recent, the other from years ago, and I hope you'll see my need to answer the old charges first, since you've heard these accusations long before the recent ones and much more often. Well then, I must make my defense, trying to clear a long-standing slander in a short time. May I succeed in this difficult task. Leaving this before the gods, in obedience to the law, I will now make my defense.
You heard Socrates mention a comic poet as one of his detractors. In the next scene, Socrates names him, Aristophanes, known as the father of comedy. His play The Cloud specifically mocked Socrates. Aristophanes' power of ridicule was feared by influential contemporaries. A particular type of teacher will also be mentioned in the upcoming scene, the sophists. Even today, the word sophist refers to an intellectually dishonest argument supporting a foregone conclusion. While sophists specialize in teaching a variety of different subjects, they also taught virtue and excellence, or claimed to, but in their own time, they gained a negative reputation for arbitrary reasoning. Sophists earned good money, but they only taught when they were paid, a practice that Socrates would scorn. Socrates now begins his defense.
Let's begin with Meletus, his slanderous indictment against me. Let me sum up the charges. Socrates is an evildoer who is criminally curious, searching into things under the earth and in the heavens above, and making the bad appear as the good, and he teaches this to others. That's the accusation. You've seen this in the comedy of Aristophanes. He introduces one Socrates going about saying that he walks in the air, talking much nonsense. However, this talk is about matters that, frankly, I don't understand at all. I don't mean to disparage any student of natural philosophy, but don't let me be prosecuted by Meletus on such a charge. The simple truth is, fellow citizens, I have nothing to do with such speculations, and most of you were witnesses to this. Speak up, tell it aloud, or speak if any of you have ever heard me speaking about natural philosophy. You see, from this part of the charge, you'll be able to judge the truth of the rest, that none of these things are true. And I don't attempt to teach men and require payment for it. Still, I believe it's an honorable thing to be able to instruct the citizens, teachers like Gorgias, Prodicus, and Hippias. These teachers go about to the different cities to teach the youth. They can attach themselves freely to fellow citizens as they please, gaining money and thanks besides. There's another wise man here, a Parian staying in the city. I'll tell you a story about him. I happen to visit a person who spends more money on the sophists than all others together. I mean Callias, son of Hipponicus. So, having two sons, I said to him, Callias, if your two sons were colts or calves, you'd choose a master for them, hiring someone to bring out their excellent qualities like a groom or a farm trainer. But since your sons are becoming men, what master do you intend to choose for them? Who is there skilled in the qualities that becomes a virtuous man and a good citizen? Is there anyone? Certainly, he answered. Who is he, I said, and where does he come from? And on what terms does he teach? He replied, Evenus the Parian, and for 5 minas. I imagine Evenus was quite happy, assuming he really possesses this gift and teaches skillfully. And I would also think highly of myself and be very proud if in fact I possessed such knowledge. But I don't. So perhaps one of you may now object. But Socrates, what have you done? How did these slanders about you come about? If you had not gone too far in what you teach, such a story would never have taken root. Tell us what different thing you do from the other teachers. We don't want to be reckless and uninformed in judging you. It's a fair question, and I'll try to show you what brought on these charges. Now listen, you may think I'm not serious and just being clever, but really, I'll tell you the whole truth. I've acquired this character through a particular wisdom. What kind of wisdom? Perhaps it's merely human wisdom. In this way, I do appear to be wise. The others I mentioned perhaps possessed a wisdom more than human. I don't know what to say about it. I'm not acquainted with it. And whoever says I am speaks falsely and slanders me. Athenians, don't cry out against me, even though I may sound a bit arrogant. What I'm telling you is not just from me, but from a source you trust. The witness is the spirit of the god at Delphi, which will attest to whatever wisdom I may have. I'm sure you know Sheriffon. Sheriffon, right? He was with me from his youth. You know him, right? He accompanied you in your recent exile after our defeat by Sparta and returned with you. You know what kind of man Sheriffon was. His devotion and seriousness in whatever he undertook. Well, once he went to Delphi and put a question to the oracle. And Athenians, don't cry out now. He asked if there was anyone wiser than me. And the Pythian oracle answered that there was none wiser. Here, his brother will confirm it since Sheriffon is now dead.
You likely know that there were many gods in the Greek pantheon. You may have heard of the primary Greek gods, like Zeus, Apollo, Athena, and others. Some were involved in human affairs, including having sexual relationships with humans. The offspring of such sexual relationships often resulted in beings halfway between gods and humans, a hybrid. These hybrid offsprings would often be called demigods, and they would have their own sexual encounters with humans, complicating the pantheon of gods, demigods, and other spiritual beings considerably. Socrates describes his authority as coming from the Oracle of Delphi, a spiritual being that is not accepted as a full god. Socrates is charged, therefore, with disavowing the true gods. He was charged with heresy against the primary gods of Athens. By inference, the charge is he does not accept the primary gods, and he's accused, therefore, of atheism, all of which he's charged in with teaching others. By failing to acknowledge the primary Greek gods, he's also seen as being treasonous against the city-state of Athens.
Athenians, many nasty and ugly opponents have arisen against me with their many slanders. Among them is this designation of being wise, since some think I am wise in certain things, and then I expose the ignorance of others. The god, however, appears to be truly wise. I mean his oracle, that human wisdom is worth little or nothing. Indeed, he didn't say this directly about Socrates, but the oracle did use me as an example to make a point. It's like the oracle said that the wisest among you is like Socrates, who knows that in reality he has no wisdom. Still, I, with no real wisdom, go about searching and inquiring in obedience to my duty to the spirit of the god, working among any thought to be wise. And now when the person seems not to be so wise, I do my duty to the spirit of the god and reveal how that person isn't wise. And with so many thought to be wise, and being fully devoted to my duties to the spirit of the god, I end up with no free time to take care of any other responsibilities. My devotion to serving the spirit of the god has left me in poverty. Bear in mind, young men enjoying the leisure of their wealthy families choose to follow me freely, delighting in how I test the wise. They often imitate me, trying to test others. It seems they find a whole lot of folks who believe themselves wise, although these wise ones know little or nothing. And when the young men put others to the test, their subjects get angry with me, not them. They say, "There is Socrates, an obnoxious man who corrupts the youth." And when asked how I corrupt them, they have nothing to say, because they don't know. But so they have something to say in response. They declare the usual charge against all philosophers, that he searches into things the heavens above and the things under the earth, that he does not believe that there are gods, and he makes the worse appear the better. They don't want to tell the truth that they've been found out, pretending to be knowing when knowing nothing. So being ambitious, vehement, and numerous in speaking against me, they've been slandering me for a long time. And from among these, Meletus, Meletus, and Lycan have attacked. Meletus is angry on account of the poets and the writers. Meletus on account of the skilled artisans and the high state officials. And Lycan on account of the orators and the public speakers. Like I said, in such a short time, could I erase the age-old slanders from your mind? But this is the truth, Athenians. I speak it without hiding or disguising anything. even though I seem obnoxious. Actually, it's proof that I speak the truth. This is the nature of the slander against me and its causes. Examine it any time, and you'll find it sound. Let this be a sufficient response to the charges of my first accusers.
A reminder that this trial is taking place before 501 jurors or judges. There would also have been many onlookers viewing a trial of a famous person like Socrates. In the tumult of reconstructing a system of governance, Athens did not have a specific set of written laws or statutes. Each of these cases was determined on its own merits. The 501 jurors would hear the charges from those who were prosecuting the case, and then they would hear the defense against the charges from the defendant. After hearing both sides, they would then vote whether or not to convict or acquit the accused. If they voted to convict, then they would vote again to determine what the penalty would be. Socrates resumes his defense by cross-examining one of his accusers.
Now, let me respond to Meletus and my later accusers. The testimony of my different accusers is pretty much as follows. Socrates, the charge says, acts unjustly in corrupting the youth and in not believing in our gods, but believes in other strange divinities. That's the accusation. Now let's examine each element of it. It says I act unjustly by corrupting the youth. But I, Athenians, say that Meletus acts unjustly. He mocks serious subjects, rashly putting men on trial. He pretends to be zealous, earnestly asking about things he was never concerned with before. Let me prove it to you. Meletus, tell me, don't you consider it of the greatest importance for the youth to be made as righteous as possible?
I do.
So now, tell the judges who makes them more righteous. You must know, since it concerns you so much, having found me corrupting them, you have cited me and accused me. So now, inform the judges who then makes the youth more righteous.
I've already said.
Meletus, come on, you have nothing to say. Oh, doesn't it quite disgraceful, proving what I said, that you never had any concern about the youth or their righteousness? Come on, tell me. Tell me then, who makes them more righteous?
The laws.
Yeah, you didn't answer my question, friend. Is it someone who must know the laws?
These, Socrates, the judges.
What do you mean, Meletus? Are these 500 judges able to instruct the youth and make them more righteous?
Certainly.
All 500? Or only some of them, but not others?
Oh!
By the gods, good news! There's an abundance of people able to make the youth more righteous. So, can this audience make them more virtuous?
They can too.
And what about the senators?
And the senators too.
But Meletus, do those who attend the public assemblies corrupt the younger men, or do they all make them more virtuous.
They do that too.
Amazing! It seems that every Athenian makes them righteous and virtuous except me.
Ah,
I alone corrupt them. Is that what you're saying?
that's exactly what I'm saying.
Oh, you charge me with great maliciousness. But answer me. Is it the same with horses? Well, do all people make horses better and only one person ruins them? Or is this wrong? Is there one person who can make them better? Or very few, that is, the trainers. But if people generally meddle with horses or use them, do they ruin them? Isn't this the case, Meletus, for horses and other animals? Of course it's true, whether you or Meletus deny it or not. For it would be hugely beneficial for the youth if only one person corrupted them and the rest benefited them. However, Meletus, you've shown that you yourself never cared about the youth, and you
Not true.
clearly reflect your own negligence, that you never paid any attention to the very things that you accuse me of. So, tell us further, Meletus, in the name of Zeus, whether it is better to dwell with good or bad citizens. Answer me, my friend, this isn't hard. Don't the bad work some evil on those continually near them, but the good work some good?
Certainly.
Is there anyone who wants to be harmed rather than benefited by his associates? Answer, good man, for the law requires you to answer. Is there anyone who wishes to be harmed?
No one, surely.
Then you accuse me of corrupting the youth,
Yes.
making them wicked. Huh? So, do I do this intentionally or not?
Intentionally, I say.
What then, Meletus? Are you at your time of life so much wiser than I at my time of life? You know that evil ones are always working some evil on those near them, just as the good are working some good. Yet am I so ignorant that I don't realize that by making any of my associates wicked and bent on evil, I put myself in danger of receiving evil from them? And would I foster this evil intentionally, as you say? I cannot believe you, Meletus, nor would any other man in the world. Either I do not corrupt the youth, or if I do corrupt them, I do it unintentionally. In both cases, you speak falsely. Because if I corrupt them unintentionally, well, you don't take the matter here to court. You take the person aside to teach and admonish. If I'm taught and corrected, I won't keep doing what I did unintentionally.
Huh.
But Meletus, you shunned me. You were unwilling to associate with me and instruct me. Rather, you accuse me here in a court for those needing punishment, not instruction and correction.
The upcoming scene, you'll hear of Anaxagoras, a natural philosopher. The area of philosophical interest for Anaxagoras focused on the cosmic mind and physical elements in the world and what they were about. It was entirely different from Socrates' teaching about righteousness, virtue, justice, what makes life worth living, and how to make difficult decisions. About a century earlier, Anaxagoras was also tried for impiety. He was banished from Athens. Socrates now resumes his cross-examination.
Oh, Athenians, clearly Meletus never paid a bit of attention to matters concerning the youth. Tell us, Meletus, how do I corrupt the youth? Let's clarify the indictment. Is it by teaching them not to believe in our gods, but in strange deities? And by teaching these things, you say I corrupt the youth, true?
Precisely that.
Well, by those very gods, Meletus, clarify this for me and for these citizens. Do you say that I teach them to believe that there are only certain gods? Or is it that I teach them not about our gods, but other gods? Or do you say outright that I don't believe in any gods, that That I teach atheism?
I say you are an atheist.
Oh, wonderful Meletus. How do you arrive at that conclusion? Don't I, like everyone, believe that the sun and the moon are gods?
No, hear me, oh judges. He says that the sun is a stone and the moon an earth.
you think you're accusing Anaxagoras, Meletus. You insult these men. They aren't illiterate. They know how the teachings of Anaxagoras are full of such assertions. So the young only learn these things from me? For a trifling drachma, couldn't they buy a front row seat and laugh at Socrates if he pretended such absurd ideas were his own? Do you really believe that I believe in no gods?
No, by Zeus, none, whatever.
That's incredible, Meletus. Not only to me, but even to yourself. Oh, Athenians, Meletus appears very insolent and reckless, bringing this indictment with arrogance, bitterness, and impulsiveness. And he seems to have composed a riddle to test us. Will Socrates the wise know that I am mocking him while I contradict myself? Or will I succeed in deceiving him and all who hear me? In my opinion, he clearly contradicts himself in the indictment. Is Meletus saying Socrates is guilty for not believing there are gods and in believing that there are gods? Surely he must be joking. Consider this contradiction with me now, Athenians. Meletus, answer me. And Athenians, remember not to interrupt if I speak with my usual manner. Is there anyone, Meletus, who believes that there are human affairs, but does not believe that they are human? Let him answer, judges. Quiet down. Or try this. Is there anyone who does not believe there are horses, but there are things pertaining to horses? Or who does not believe that there are flute players, but that there are things pertaining to flutes? You offer no answer. So how about this? Can one believe that there are things relating to the spirits of gods, but does not believe that there are gods?
No, one cannot.
Oh, Athenians, we have an answer. Thanks to these judges for demanding one. So you admit then that I do believe and teach things relating to the spirits of gods. You swore this admission in the indictment. If I believe in things relating to the spirits of gods, then necessarily I must believe that there are gods. Is it not so? Of course it is. Lacking your answer, I suppose you agree. Yet about the spirits of gods, do we not allow that they are gods or children of the gods? Do you agree or not?
Certainly.
Well, agreeing that there are spirits of gods, and if the spirits of the gods are of a kind with the gods, that's why I say you speak in riddles. You subvert your own argument, saying that I do not believe that there are gods. But then you say, I do believe there are gods, since I allow that there are spirits of God. But if the spirits of gods, illegitimate ones, either from nymphs or any others, what person can think that there are spirits of gods, and yet there are no gods? It would be just as absurd as if someone who thinks there are mules, the offspring of horses and asses, also denies that there are horses and asses. Meletus, you brought this indictment to test me?
Yes.
Or because you were at a loss for a real crime to allege against me? For you to persuade anyone with the slightest intelligence that a person can think that there are things relating to the spirits of gods and to gods, and yet think that there are neither spirits of gods nor gods, is utterly impossible.
In the upcoming scene, Socrates will mention the mythological hero Achilles, the greatest of all warriors. It isn't until later that we hear the story about Achilles' heel. Socrates refers to Achilles in a discussion about facing deadly danger. He uses his own military experience as an example. Again, the Peloponnesian War went on from when Socrates was 38 until 4 years before this trial, when he was 65. Now he's 69. Socrates had served in the Athenian military during the long Peloponnesian War. Socrates is inferring at the same time he is faithful and loyal to Athens. He resumes his defense.
All right. I am not guilty then, Athenians. Meletus' indictment doesn't require a lengthy defense. What I've said is enough. As I said at the beginning, there is truly great hostility toward me from the men. My condemnation, if I am condemned, won't be due to the accusations of Meletus and Meletus, but rather the hostility and envy of the masses, which has condemned many others before this. And those same citizens will keep condemning people who do not say what is acceptable and expected. It won't stop with me. Now, one may say, aren't you ashamed and regretful, Socrates? You pursued a course of knowledge that puts you in danger of dying. Well, to that person I should answer with good reason. You're mistaken, friend, if you think that anyone should consider the risk of life or death. That is not the only consideration. Ask whether the actions are just or unjust, and whether they indicate a righteous or unrighteous person. By such reasoning, all those heroes who died at Troy would be regarded with contempt, along with Achilles, the son of Thetis, who rejected danger and refused to submit to disgrace. When his mother, a goddess, spoke to him about his impatience to kill Hector, she said something like, "My son, if you revenge the death of your friend Patroclus and slay Hector, you will yourself die, for a fate of death immediately awaits after Hector." And at hearing this, Achilles despised death and danger, dreading far more to live as a coward, not avenging his friend. He said, "May I die immediately when I've inflicted punishment on the guilty. Failing that, should I remain here by the sleek ships to be ridiculed, a burden upon the earth?" Do you think Achilles cared about death and danger? For truly, Athenians, wherever any warrior has posted himself, either thinking it's a preferred place or having been posted there by his commander, in that place he should stay and meet the danger, taking no account either of death or anything else, or else be condemned with cowardly disgrace. Athenians, when the generals assigned me my post at Posidea, at Amphipolis, and at Delium, I remained where assigned, like any other, and encountered the danger of death. Yet when the spirit of the god assigned my duty to spend my life in the study of philosophy, searching and examining myself and others, I would be acting strangely if, fearing death or anything else, I deserted my god-assigned post. To fear death, O Athenians, is nothing but the appearance of being wise. For it is to appear to know what one does not know. For no one knows. Perhaps death is the greatest of all good to humanity. But people fear it. as if they knew for certain that it's the greatest of all evils. Isn't this the most disgraceful ignorance? To think one knows what one does not know. Perhaps I differ from most. And if I believe I'm wiser than another in any way, it would be in this: I admit to having no competent knowledge of Hades. But I do know that to act unjustly is evil and shameful, or to disobey my superior, whether of the gods or of man. So I shall never fear or shun things which, for all I know, may be good, compared to the things which I know for certain to be evils. Athenians, if you should say to me, Socrates, we shall not uphold the accusation of Meletus, but instead dismiss you on this condition, that you no longer continue speaking out with your questioning or continue pursuing philosophy, and if you're discovered doing so, you shall die. Well, then I would say, Athenians, I honor and love you, but I shall obey the spirit of the god rather than you. So long as I live and breathe, I shall not cease studying philosophy, exhorting you and admonishing any of you I may meet. Indeed, this is how the spirit of the god commands me. No greater good has ever come to the city than my zeal for serving the spirit of the god. For I go about doing nothing else besides persuading you, young and old, to set no priority for the body or for riches, instead making the soul your priority. I teach how the soul may be made most perfect, that virtue does not spring from riches, but riches and all other human blessings are from virtue. And if by saying these things I corrupt the youth, then these things about the soul must be malicious. But if anyone says that I speak otherwise, he misleads you. And I must say, Athenians, agree with Meletus or not, dismiss me or not, regardless, I will not act differently, even though I must die many deaths. Oh, don't interrupt, Athenians. Bear with me. Listen, I think you'll benefit from this. Now, I'm going to say things which may have you calling out again, but don't do so. Now listen, if you put me to death, a teacher as I say I am, you won't harm me as much as yourselves. Neither Meletus nor Meletus can harm me, nor do they have the power to do so. I don't think it's possible for a better person to be harmed by a worse person. He may have me condemned to death, or banished, or deprived of civil rights. He and others may consider these mighty evils. I don't. Their cases have much more to do with the attempt to put a man to death unjustly. Now, Athenians, my defense is not simply for my own sake, as one might think, but I do so on your behalf, lest by condemning me, you should disrespect the deity's gift to you. See, if you should put me to death, you will not easily find another like me. It may sound ridiculous, all of you attached by the deity to this city, as if you are a powerful and generous force, large and somewhat sluggish, and needing a gadfly to buzz you, to get you energized. So the deity attached me, just as I am, to the city, that I may annoyingly buzz about you and arouse you and challenging and reproving every one of you, besetting you all day long. Finding another man to be the gadfly, to buzz, annoy, and energize you, Athenians, will not be easy. Take my advice and spare me. Oh, so perhaps being irritated like a napping person roused from sleep, you will swat at the gadfly and, consenting to Meletus' petition, recklessly condemn me to death. Then, Athenians, you will sleep through the rest of your life, unless the deity cares enough to send you another gadfly to buzz you. Someone just like me. And clearly, I am the one given to this city by the deity.
In the upcoming scene, Socrates will mention Socrates. This was a rotating governing body composed of 50 senators from each of 10 tribes, resulting in 500 senators. Each senator held office for 1 year. Each tribe would lead the Prytanes for a tenth of the year, and then pass on the leadership to another tribe. Socrates served as a member of the delegation of his tribe. He also refers to the oligarchy of the 30, known as the 30 tyrants that were installed by Sparta after Athens surrendered at the end of the 27-year Peloponnesian War. Sparta tasked the 30 tyrants with creating a new form of government. Rather than creating a constitution, the 30 tyrants ruled. They ruled themselves. Although they only held power for 8 months before the Athenians overthrew them, the 30 oligarchs were brutal. They killed 5% of the Athenian population. They confiscated citizens' property. They exiled supporters of democracy. In the upcoming section, you'll hear Socrates continue talking about the basic fundamental principles of philosophy, how to make decisions, what's right or wrong, when is life worth living. Socrates continues.
Well, it may appear absurd that I go about privately advising and remaining busy in many ways, yet I never present myself publicly at your assemblies and give advice to the city. The reason, because I'm moved by a certain divine and spiritual influence, which Meletus, with mockery, set out in the indictment. And this began in childhood, a kind of voice diverting me from my tasks, but never urging me to get it done. This prevented my meddling in public politics, and I think correctly. Surely, O Athenians, if I had attempted to get involved with politics, I'd have perished long ago, with no benefit to you or me. Oh, don't be angry with me. Don't be angry with me for speaking the truth. Indeed, no one should be safe who truly opposes you or any other citizen assembly. Your role in making judgments prevents many unjust and illegal actions from being committed here. But whoever truly fights for justice would be safe only for a short time, should live privately, and take no part in public politics. I'll give you convincing proof of this, not with words, but what you value, facts. Hear what happened to me, how I would not yield justice to an opponent. The threat of death was before me, but I did not yield, knowing I would surely die. While true, this account is unpleasant and tedious. I never held any other magisterial office in the city except as a senator. Our tribe, Antiochus, provided the designated state officials, the Prytanes, that presided when a group of 10 generals was put on trial for not removing those slain in battle. You judges decided to put them on trial as a group, not individually, violating the law. And at that time, I, alone among the Prytanes, opposed your acting contrary to the laws, and I voted against you. And when the orators were ready to impeach and arrest me and set me before a magistrate, you, O Athenians, urged and cheered them on. I decided that I'd meet this threat with law and justice on my side, despite fear of imprisonment or death, rather than join in your injustice. This happened during the time of democracy. But when that oligarchy of the 30 were in power, they sent me with 4 others to the Tholos, the Rotunda, and they ordered us to bring Leon the Salaminian from Salamis to put him to death. They gave many similar orders, trying to condemn as many as they could in guilt. But then I showed, not in word but by my action, that I had no care about death. I was wholly concerned to do no injustice nor engage in unholy acts. That government, strong as it was, did not intimidate me into committing an injustice. When we came out from the Rotunda, the 4 went to Salamis, brought back Leon, but I went home. And I might have been put to death if that government of the 30 had not suddenly ended. And you have many witnesses to all this. Do you think I could have survived so many years if I had engaged in public politics, acting as a righteous man, aiding the cause of justice, having deemed righteousness and justice of the highest importance? Far from it, Athenians. No one could survive. All my life, nothing I've ever done in public or in private would have me concede to injustice, not to anyone, not even for those whom my slanderers say are my disciples. I never had disciples. If anyone desired to hear me and see me pursuing my mission, whether young or old, I never refused them. I don't teach when I receive money and refuse to teach without it. I allow both rich and poor alike to question me. And when they answer me in response, they can hear what I have to say in reply. But if anyone ever claims to have heard anything from me in private, which has not been heard publicly, then that person is lying. So, why are some delighted to spend a long time with me? You heard me earlier, Athenians. I told you how they delight to hear the wise vigorously question. It's quite entertaining. But my role and task has been set upon me by the deity, by oracles, by dreams, and by every mode that any divine decree has ever been set upon anyone. These things, Athenians, are both true and easily refuted if not true. If I am now corrupting some of the youths, having already corrupted others, then if any of them in maturity discover that I gave them bad advice in their youth, they should now rise up against me, accuse me, have me punished. Or if they're unwilling to do this, then having their friends or their fathers or their brothers or other relatives do it. If people they know have ever been harmed by my teachings, they should recall it now. Look, I see many of them are present here. Crito, my contemporary and fellow citizen, his son Critobulus, and then Lysanias and Aeschines. There is Antiphon. There are those others too. Nicostratus and Paralus are here. Adimantus, whose brother Plato is here. Intodorus, whose brother Apollodorus is here. I could mention many others from whom Meletus ought to have received testimony as witnesses, and if he forgot, let him now ask for the testimony. Now is fine. Let him say if he has any witness testimony to add to his case. Quite the contrary, Athenians. These people who I just pointed out are ready to assist me. I, who have corrupted and injured their relatives, as Meletus and Meletus say. Those who have been corrupted seem to have found some reason to testify on my behalf. But those not corrupted men now advanced in age, well, what other reason can they have for assisting me except for righteousness and justice? They know that Meletus is lying and that I speak the truth. Well, Athenians, this is pretty much my defense. One more thing. Some among you will be upset, remembering your own case that may have once been before the court. Although the issue was perhaps far less serious than this. You begged and shed tears, pleading with the judges, bringing forward your children to inspire their deepest compassion, parading out many other relatives and friends. I'm doing none of these things, despite the threat of grave danger in my case. And noticing my refusal to put on such a show, perhaps someone may get angry and become even more committed to vote against me. And if this describes anyone, not knowing if it does, but if it does, I would say this. I too have relatives. I'm reminded of the saying of Homer. I am not sprung from an oak, nor from a rock, but from men. So that I too, Athenians, have relatives. I have 3 sons, one now grown up, 2 boys. I won't bring any of them forward and grovel, begging you to acquit me. Why would I refuse to do this? Well, I don't want to show you contempt or disrespect you, Athenians. As far as my own character and yours and that of the whole city, it would be dishonorable to make such impassioned appeals like that at my age, with my reputation, whether it's true or false. Most would agree that Socrates sometimes exceeds the expectations of most people. If any of you acted in the manner I've seen at trial, it would be shameful. Those thought to be something special, conducting themselves in a strange manner, dreading the thought of dying as if they would be immortal if you didn't put them to death. Such men disgrace the whole city. Any stranger coming here supposing that the Athenians excel in virtue, seeing the ones chosen for high offices and other honors, would find they are no better than women. For these reasons, Athenians, we who have attained any stature and reputation should not do such things. And if we did, you ought to punish us. You should condemn the one who stages these pitiful dramas, making the city look ridiculous, rather than condemning the one who quietly awaits your decision. Even apart from reputation, Athenians, it isn't right to manipulate a judge with passionate appeals or to gain acquittal by such manipulations. Rather, one ought to inform and persuade him. For a judge doesn't administer justice by showing favoritism, but by trying to reason out justice. He's sworn to decide according to the laws, not to favor whoever pleases. None of you should be accustomed to violating your oaths amid emotional appeals and favoritism, because then none of us would act righteously. Don't think that I ought to adopt necessarily such a dishonorable, unjust, and unholy course toward you, now especially when Meletus accuses me of making up corruptions about the gods. If I was so persuasive that my emotional appeals caused you to break your oath, then I should teach you that there are no gods. In making my defense, I should accuse myself of not believing in the gods. But this is far from the case, for I do believe in the gods, but not as my accusers believe in the gods. I leave it to you and to the deity to judge concerning me in such a way that'll be best for you and for me.
Now, it's time for the Athenians and the jury to vote whether Socrates is guilty of corrupting the youth in atheism or not. They decided. 280 Athenians voted that he was guilty. 221 voted that he was not. In terms of percentages, the vote was 56 guilty to 44% not guilty. A change of 30 votes could have changed the outcome, and Socrates would have been found not guilty. Now that the Athenians have voted for a verdict of guilty, the jury has to decide what the penalty will be. They have to choose between a proposed punishment from the accusers and a proposed punishment from Socrates. Socrates' accusers proposed the death penalty. Many expected that Socrates would propose that he be banished from Athens. Instead, Socrates proposed that he should be hosted at Athens' Prytaneum. In ancient Greece, the Prytaneum often served as town hall, where the city-states housed their own chief magistrates, where they celebrated Olympic athletes, accomplished citizens, and ambassadors. Socrates now responds to the guilty verdict and proposes his penalty.
I don't grieve this vote of condemnation, Athenians. I expected it. But I do marvel about the vote, since I thought there would be a large majority voting to condemn me, not such a small number. Apparently, if only a few dozen votes went differently, I would have been acquitted. And as far as Meletus' charge is concerned, I've already been acquitted. Not only have I been acquitted, but it's clear to all that if Meletus and Lycon had not come forward to accuse me, Meletus would have been fined 1,000 drachmas for failing to get a fifth part of the votes. So Meletus proposes that I face the death penalty. Well, but what penalty shall I propose for myself? Shouldn't I get what I deserve? And what's that? Do I deserve a harsh penalty? Or to pay a fine? No, for my whole life I have purposefully spoken out and spoken freely, but I neglected what most seek after: wealth, family interests, military command, popular oratory, moreover all those high office, the conspiracy, the schemes in the city. I thought I was too righteous to survive the intrigues if I got involved in those things. So I didn't make those my pursuits, and they would have been of no service to you or to me. Rather, to confer the greatest benefit on each of you, privately I applied myself to persuading every one of you to do nothing before seeking to develop virtue and wisdom for yourself. In like manner, one should be concerned for the city itself before being concerned for the promising opportunities in the city. So what do I deserve? Some reward, Athenians. If I'm measured truly and fairly, the reward must be suitable to one like me. What is suitable to a poor man who brought you benefit, who seeks opportunities to teach you virtue and wisdom? Nothing is so suitable, Athenians, as being celebrated in the civic center, the Prytaneum. And indeed it is more suitable for me than for a hero victorious at the Olympic Games from a horse race or a chariot race. The celebration event makes the champion appear happy, but I am happy. He does not need support, but I do. If I must award a just sentence to myself, I award myself this: being celebrated in the Prytaneum. Perhaps I appear to speak in the same presumptuous manner as I did about passions and pleading. That's not the case, Athenians. Because rather, I'm convinced that I never intentionally harmed anyone, even though I can't convince you of this. Friends, we've had this exchange with each other for only a short time. If the law in Athens was as in other places, that in death penalty cases the trial should not take one day, but many, I think you'd be convinced. But it isn't easy in a short time to refute great slanders. And being convinced that I harmed no one, I hardly intend to injure myself, as if I deserve harsh punishment or anything of the kind. Fearing what? Fearing I should suffer how Meletus would punish me, not knowing whether his proposal is good or evil? Instead, shall I choose what I know to be evil and receive that? Shall I choose imprisonment? And why should I live in prison? A slave to the established magistrates, the 11? Shall I choose a fine and be imprisoned until I've paid it? As mentioned, I have no money to pay a fine. Shall I then seek exile for myself? Perhaps you would consent to this penalty. But I'd have to be delusional if I couldn't figure out that you, my fellow citizen, can't stand my way of life and my freewheeling discourses. They've become so burdensome and noxious that now you seek to be rid of them, rid of me. Will others somewhere else find them acceptable wherever I find exile? Not hardly. A fine life it would be, at my age, to go wandering from city to city. I know that wherever I go, the youth will listen to me when I speak, as they do here. And if I repulse them, they will drive me out, convincing the elders to do so. Perhaps some will say, Socrates, when you have gone from us, can't you just live a silent, quiet life? This is the most difficult thing of all to persuade you about. For if I say that, I'd be disobeying the deity. So it's impossible for me to live quietly, silently. But you would not believe me, thinking I'm joking. And if I say that this is the greatest good to all, to teach daily on virtue, justice, and other things I've noted, examining both myself and others, that a life without examination is not worth living, you'd believe me even less. And yet this is the case, even though you're not easily convinced. And at the same time, I'm not accustomed to thinking I deserve punishment. Oh, if I were rich, I'd find myself a sum I could pay. Then I'd suffer no harm. But now I can't. unless you find me a sum I can pay. Maybe I could pay you a mina of silver. In that sum, I find myself. But Plato here, and Crito, and Critobulus, and Apollodorus, they ask me to find myself 30 minas of silver, and they offer to be guarantors. I find myself 30 minas then, and they will be strong guarantors for the money.
Earlier, the jury voted 280 to 221 that Socrates was guilty by a margin of 56% to 44%. Jury now votes when choosing between putting Socrates to death. 360 jurors, 72%, voted to put him to death. Only 141, 28%, voted not to put him to death. There were 80 jurors who voted that he was not guilty, but then voted to put him to death. Socrates responds.
For a long time, Athenians, you will be bad-mouthed by those eager to defame the city for having put that wise man Socrates to death. Those eager to defame you will say that I am wise, but I am not. If you waited a short time, my death would come naturally. Check my age. I'm pretty far along in life and nearing the season of death. I say this not to all, but only to those who sentence me to death. And another thing to those same persons. Perhaps you think that my conviction was due to the lack of arguments to persuade you that I would do and say anything to keep from being convicted? Far from it. I've been convicted through a lack, but not of arguments, but a lack of audacity, a lack of arrogance. I lacked the words that you wanted to hear, lacking the moaning and the weeping and the doing and saying things unworthy of me, what you are familiar with from others. To avoid this outcome, I've never thought to do anything unrighteous, nor do I regret my defense. I'd much rather die for my defense than to live by exploiting unworthy, unrighteous means. For neither in a trial nor in battle is it right that I or anyone else should use every possible means to avoid death. In battle, it's often clear that a man could escape death by laying down his arms, throwing himself on the mercy of his pursuers. And there are many other means in every danger to avoid death if a man dares to do and say anything. It isn't difficult to escape death, Athenians, but it's much more difficult to avoid unrighteousness. For unrighteousness runs swifter than death. And now, being old and slow, I'm overtaken by the slower of the two, death. But my accusers, being strong and active, have been overtaken by the swifter, unrighteousness. Now I depart, condemned by you to death. But they stand condemned by truth, being guilty of unrighteousness and injustice. I stand with my sentence. So do they. These things perhaps ought to be as fated, and I think they're for the best. But next, let me predict your fate, you who condemn me. I'm now about to die, being in the extreme state when people are gifted to prophesy. To you who have condemned me to death, immediately after my death, far more severe punishment will overtake you than what gets inflicted on me. Oh, you did this thinking you would be free from giving an account of your lives. Arrogant Socrates and his obnoxious questions will be silenced forever. Well, just the opposite will happen to you. Your accusers will be more numerous than just me. I had restrained them, but you haven't noticed. And your accusers will be more severe. They're younger, and you'll be even more offended by them. If you think that by putting men to death, anyone will show you restraint in accusing you of conducting yourselves unrighteously, you're sadly mistaken. Trying to escape judgment is neither possible nor honorable. The most honorable and easy way is not to censor the critics, but to take close examination of oneself to discover how one may best attain virtue. Having prophesied to those who condemned me, I depart from you. Now, those who voted for my acquittal, let's discuss what's taken place while the magistrates are busy and I'm not yet carried off to where I must die. So stay with me for a while, since nothing hinders our conversation with each other. I want to make known to you, friends, the meaning of what has befallen me. Oh, my judges, and rightly I call you judges. A strange thing has happened. You know, the customary prophetic voice of my deity opposes me on occasions when I may act unrighteously, even in trivial matters. But now the extremity of evil has come upon me. And yet, the Spirit of the God did not warn me this morning when I left home, nor did the Spirit of the God oppose me during the trial as I spoke. On other occasions, the Spirit of the God has often opposed and restrained me in the midst of speaking. Yet throughout this proceeding, the Spirit of the God never opposed me either in what I did or what I said. So how do we explain this? I'll tell you. What's befallen me appears to be a blessing. Those of us who believe that death is an evil are wrong. The great proof to me is the absence of that usual signal of the Spirit of the God that opposes me. So I must have been headed toward something good. Well, we can conclude that there's great reason to hope that death is a blessing, not evil, but good. For to die is one of two things. Either the dead may be annihilated into nothingness with no sensation of anything, or there is a certain change and passage of the soul from one place to another. If it's nothingness, a deprivation of all sensation, like sleep with no dream, death would be a wonderful gain. Well, I think any night when a person slept so soundly that they had no dream compared to all the other nights and days of his life would have to consider how many days and nights had passed that were more pleasant than this night. Not only a common citizen, but even the great king himself would find those special days and nights few in number. If death is like this, I say death is a gain. Eternity seems to be nothing more than one night. If, on the other hand, death is a removal from here to another place, and if it's true that all the dead are there, Well, what greater blessing could there be? Imagine if on arriving in Hades, freed from these pretender judges, one finds those who are true judges. Minos, Rhadamanthus, Aeacus, Triptolemus, and such other sons of the gods who were righteous in their own lives. Would that make you sad? What would be the price for a conference with Orpheus and Musaeus, Hesiod, Homer? I'd be willing to die often if that was true. Oh, for me, the sojourn there would be amazing. Meeting with Palamedes and Ajax, son of Telamon, and any of the ancients who has died by unjust sentence. Comparing my sufferings with theirs would be fascinating. But the greatest pleasure would be to spend my time questioning and examining the people there, like I've done here, discovering who is wise and who thinks they're wise but are not. What price would anyone pay for the opportunity to question the leader of that mighty army against Troy, or Ulysses, or Sisyphus, or 10,000 others worth mentioning, both men and women, to converse with and question them? It would bring inconceivable happiness. Surely the judges there do not condemn to death those who ask questions. Those who are there are happier than those who are here, and they are immortal, if what is said is true. Judges, you should have good hopes about death. In truth, nothing is evil to a good man, either during life or after death. One's concerns are not neglected by the gods. What has befallen me is not by chance. Rather, this much is clear, that to die now, be freed from my cares, is better. And that's why no warning of the spirit of the god turned me away from my activities. Now, I bear no ill will toward those who condemn me or my accusers, since death is not as evil as they believe. Still, they did aim to harm and punish me, and for that, they deserve to be blamed. But I ask a favor from them. Criticize my sons when they grow up, judges. Afflict them as I have afflicted you. They appear to care for riches or anything else before virtue, and if they think themselves something when they're nothing, criticize them as I criticized you for not caring about the important things, for imagining themselves to be important when they're worth nothing. You do this. Both I and my sons will have received justice at your hands. Now it's time to depart. For me to die, for you to live. But which of us is better off? That is unknown to all but the gods.